Hello and welcome back to the We'll Bring the Popcorn Film and TV podcast. I'm Brad, that right over there is Josh, and today we're going to be reviewing Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
Before we jump into our reviews this week, there were a couple of news stories that kind of really stood out that I want to get into. First of all, we got hit with this big bombshell from Marvel. They put it out this week that Avengers Doomsday, the next big Avengers film that, seemingly is going to have almost everybody under the MCU sun in it, is being delayed for 6 months. So this was originally slated to come out in July of 2026. It's now been moved to the end of the year in December in 2026 and kind of really flooding that month at the end of next year with just another big movie in a month that's already got a bunch of, big time films that are going to be coming out around that time that are already slated. We don't know if it's going to affect the release of these other films or not, but that's a big loss for people who were hoping to get that story soon, because now, if you look at the way that the Marvel schedule is lining up, you have Fantastic Four that's getting ready to come out in July, and the next one we get won't be Avengers. It's going to be whenever they decide to put out Spider-Man 4, which could be in July now, but we don't know.
Yeah, it's like the first Spider-Man Brand New Day was going to be after Doomsday. Now it's potentially, if it keeps its release date, is going to be before Doomsday, so we don't know if that's going to change. Doomsday, of course, is a very connected movie, so is it going to be connected to, is there anything in Spider-Man that they need to change because Doomsday is gone? And yeah, Doomsday is now going up against Dune Messiah, which is another bit. So you have two mega blockbusters. I can't see them both staying at that same date. Like, you might get a week or two in between, but as you said, December of 2026 has
stacked.
Shrek 5, Ice Age 6, Jumanji 4, even got like Robert Eggers' Werewolf horror film is supposed to be out in December that year, along with Doomsday now and Dune Messiah. Like, that's a insanely stacked December. I got to see at least one or two of those films moving.
Yeah, it's going to be tentative to see how everybody shuffles it around, because typically when something as big as a property like Marvel comes knocking, there's not really anything that wants to go up against it the same week. If they want to stagger the releases, it could be something they look into. Also, knowing that Shrek could be another one that maybe sees its date move, because you haven't really heard a whole lot about what's going on with it yet, how far they are in the animation for it, and
Dune hasn't even filmed.
Dune hasn't even started filming. That may be one that gets pushed out even further. It could move into 2027, but it's also going to affect the release of Secret Wars as well, because Secret Wars is also moving from middle of 2027 to the end of 2027 now. So you have two huge Marvel tentpoles that are getting moved to later in the year, to the end of the year in their respective years. That's a big shift for Marvel, and that leaves a very sizable gap in projects coming out. Now, we've talked about Marvel pushing too much content out there and then wanting to scale that back a little bit, but this is going to leave a very significant gap in things that are coming out, because you have a full slate of stuff coming out for the rest of the year for Marvel, but when you get into next year, there's not a ton on the docket that you can kind of hang your hat on to keep people, interested in your product in the meantime, because you have, hopefully Daredevil season 2 will come out in the spring, but you have Spider-Man in July, and then you won't have anything until December. Like, we don't know what else Marvel has, cooking up for it, but we know X-Men 97 season 2 is not going to come out until 2027. So it's like
you don't exactly know when the Punisher a one-off is going to happen. They seem like they're casting right now. It potentially could be slotted sometime in there, but that's another at-home viewing. It's not a wide theatrical release. So yeah, it's just kind of crazy. It's been a month. They've been filming a month, and they already feel like they need to delay 6 months to both films to be able to do what they needed. It also brings up the question, was part of this delay to be able to get Tom Holland to be able to be a part of Doomsday, because he's filming Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey till July. We don't know exactly if he's there through July or if just the film goes through July, but then he's supposed to go right into Spider-Man after that, and that's going to be a long time. So he potentially wouldn't have, unless they mix into the Spider-Man Brand New Day filming, some scenes for him to film for Doomsday, but that could be difficult depending on where exactly does Brand New Day take place in this timeline to Doomsday? Like, are they going to have to change any story? But is he going to have time to film anything for it? It could potentially be something like that. It wouldn't be the only reason, but it could be something like, well, we could probably use some more time. We need to wait like 3 more months before we could get Tom Holland on board anyway, so we'll delay. It's like we can finish the main filming that we have to do without him, then film his scenes later and put everything together. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this does, because like I said, after a month they're delaying it till December. That's crazy. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, if I were to guess what's going to happen, just to kind of put my booking hat on here a little bit, which I don't like to do too often, but if I were to speculate, I would say he's going to start filming his, Spider-Man 4. I'd say they film something that's going to be maybe a post-credit or mid-credit scene in Doomsday. Like, I don't think at this point he's going to make an appearance in the film, but he may show up in like the mid-credit or the end-credit scene to set up whatever his involvement for Secret Wars is going to be, because he's going to be involved in that. Because Secret Wars is, one, Spider-Man's a very crucial part of that story, and two, everybody under the sun is going to make an appearance in that film. Like, that's, as many people are going to be in Doomsday, everybody that's not in Doomsday will also be in Secret Wars. Like, it's going to be a freaking insane film that's going to literally have all the heroes you've seen on screen at some point are probably going to make an appearance on this, minus the ones that are no longer with us, obviously. But you got to imagine everything's going to be thrown against the wall in that one, which is going to be insane. I'm very much looking forward to it. But if I were to guess what Tom Holland's involvement is going to be at that point, it's going to probably be something along those lines, where he films something while he's doing the Spider-Man film to show up as like a post-credit or mid-credit teaser for whatever his involvement's going to be for Secret Wars. Because they got to do the whole Battle World planet and all that stuff to set up, which is going to be insane. It's going to be fun to see them set that up. But
if he's one of the last scenes of Doomsday where like they wait to the very end for his mask to come off or something, and you see it's Robert Downey in there, and you get Spider-Man showing up the last minute to help, but he sees it's Mr. Stark, and he's taken aback and something like that. Like, we just don't know. Like, it didn't look like he would have time at all to film anything for it based on his schedule. But with this delay, there's potential that it could be there. But it's just kind of wild after filming a month. Because they said they've announced barely half of the cast just for Doomsday. Right. So we don't know who else. There's still rumors going around that Marvel has stepped up looking for their next Ghost Rider, and that he could be in Doomsday as well. It's still rumored to be Ryan Gosling being their top choice, which he also said he would love to play it. So we'll see if that ends up happening. But yeah, there's a lot that could happen with this delay, because they said the only thing we really got out of it was that they delayed it to give more time to do their vision that they have done there. But that could also mean opening up schedules to be able to film some more. I mean, they could be editing and working on other parts of the movie that they have finished while they're waiting for actors to be available during this time window now.
Yeah, now you got to figure, with the very large looming presence of the X-Men moving forward too in these next couple films, they're going to be introduced via these films at some point. You have to imagine that you're going to get your first look at some of these new X-Men characters, but it's going to be really fun to see the way the landscape of Marvel shifts after this. We know we're going to lean heavily on the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, which is awesome to see them finally, have their rights finally to use them in stories and whatnot, but it's going to be interesting to see the layout of the Marvel slate beyond that, because we have it pretty much good and well locked in between now and then what's going to happen, and I'm excited to see what's going to jump off after that too, obviously, because there's so many different directions they could go in now that they've got so many more characters that they could build around. I'm excited to see what they do with it.
They're going to be wild films. I want to jump into another story that came out, because it's been talked about for a while now that we're getting another live action Street Fighter movie, and the first one is famously horrendous. Terrible. I mean, you got Jean-Claude Van Damme being Guile, the all-American guy. He doesn't even try to fake an American accent in there. It was Raul Julia's last film, being M. Bison in there. You had and kind of so cast, but I think the cast did the best they had with the type of story and stuff they had. So we've got a new one ramping up. We've got Andrew Koji and Noah Centineo. Again, I butcher names. That's what I do. They're in talks to be Ryu and Ken, so that'll be interesting. But the most interesting thing is we have 2 other actors being rumored, because you can't have a movie nowadays without Jason Momoa.
Yeah, apparently not. But he's supposedly, they haven't really announced what his involvement's going to be with it. A lot of people project him to be Blanca, which is going to be very interesting to see if he takes on that character.
He's going to look like himself, but green.
Right, and that's going to be wild to see that plays on. And another one that's got a lot of people scratching their heads for fans of WWE, that Roman Reigns could potentially be in the film as well, playing Akuma, which is a very interesting development on that too, because Roman's not had a ton of movie roles at this point, other than some, bit parts here with like Hobbs and Shaw and a couple things here and there, but like he hasn't really dove into a heavier speaking role, and who knows how heavy Akuma's involvement in this is going to be. But it's interesting to see like him jumping into something like this, and it'll be cool to see what they come up with. But yeah, that original was not good. Go back and watch it if you need a good cheesy laugh. I would put it on par with probably the second Mortal Kombat film as far as over the top cheesiness and just not being good.
Jean-Claude flax so he can show off the American flag.
Oh, he had to. Yeah, it was so over the top, but Jean-Claude was already a choice for that. But like it was just not good. But it will be interesting to see, what they do with this new version of it, and see, because there's ways you could stylize it now to make it look pretty cool. Because the way the game is presented now versus the way it was back then, obviously, is a lot different. But it could get a lot more stylized. But some of the other characters would be really interesting to see who they cast for that and what kind of story they're going to tell with it. Because taking just a straight up fighting game and making it, interesting. There's some interesting storylines in the Street Fighter games that maybe they could try to pull from, but we'll see where they go with it.
Biggest thing is just getting action sequences right. I mean, it's a fighting game you're turning into a movie, and if you don't have good fighting, like that's kind of what we saw between like Mortal Kombat. The very first Mortal Kombat was decent, sure. And then you got into the second one where it just had terrible combat, terrible everything. Yeah. And the first Street Fighter movie, didn't really have that great. I can't remember one fight scene other than seeing Jean-Claude doing a backflip to do the kick and stuff, and Bison floating around and everything else around this. It's like none of the fight scenes are really memorable. Maybe Vega down there fighting at the mask and stuff, but all the fight sequences that I can remember were like 30 seconds to a minute to maybe 2 minutes, and they were not good at all. Like, get a good action stunt guy to do your action, just kind of like how Chad took John Wick, being a stunt guy, to become director, do that. Like, you got to have good action sequences in there. And when we just throw David Harbour in as Zangief and have him just continue his Russian accent or whatever from Red Guardian, just let him be in Street Fighter doing that. And because you've got some grounded but fantastical characters, because they're gigantically ripped, or Chun-Li's gigantic thighs and everything else that you have. Like, they're human past a few characters, but they're very over the top with their look. I mean, it didn't always start out that way, past Blanca, who's always been kind of crazy over the top. But especially once I think you got past Street Fighter 4 and on, like, Ryu and Ken went from having Jean-Claude Van Damme to being Alan Ritchson. Like, they just expanded big. Like, that could be another. You get Alan Ritchson being in there, be somebody within there. Like, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of cast that they can get him to be Guile. That would work.
Wouldn't be the worst. Wouldn't be the worst pick.
But it's going to be really interesting to see if they can actually pull off. Like, they've tried some animated films and they've been okay, but it's been a property that they really haven't been able to bring into film very well so far. I mean, you had Christian Kruk did a Street Fighter film as well. So far, film wise, they're like 0 for 2 for live action Street Fighter movies.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Talking about it now kind of makes me want to. Sometimes there's just nothing better than just sitting down and watching just a really trash movie for a couple hours. And
I revisit it, and like the Super Mario Brothers movie, with John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins. Like, I revisit that every now and then just because it's as bad as I remember it.
it's been forever since I've seen the Street Fighter film. Now that we're on like as of recording this, it's a holiday weekend, so we got an extra day off. At some point, I might try to fit in watching the old Street Fighter movie just to have a point of reference and just laugh at how absurd and cheesy and over the top it was, because it wasn't good when it came out. I can't imagine now that it's aged well at all. So that'll be a good one to kind of kick back and just have a good laugh at just how absurd that film is, and it'll be a fun time. I'm going to get some enjoyment out of that.
You may have I believe it's the E. Honda actor has passed away from that film as well. So, plus you got a couple people now who has passed from the cast. As Raul passed, I think. Did he pass before that film even released?
I can't remember if he passed right before or right after, but it was right around that time. But yeah, that's definitely one to go back and just shake my head at. That's going to be a fun one to come revisit. But I want to move us now into our last news story that I wanted to talk about this week, and that is, we are very much in love with the show Ted Lasso. We both agree that we would probably both put it in our top 5 TV series of all time, honestly. Just
football is life.
How much we love that show and just love going back and revisiting. But we got a little bit of a timeline from Hannah Waddingham, of all people, while she's been doing the press tour for Lilo and Stitch. People have been asking her about
Mission Impossible.
And Mission Impossible. She is in both films. Yes, that is. Give her flowers there because she's fantastic, but she's been doing these press tours. And obviously with her being attached to Ted Lasso, people were asking about it. And she mentioned that season 4 is set to start filming in July. So it appears we could be in line for a 2026 release for Ted Lasso season 4. So excited for that. But it's cool to see like a hard timeline on when that's going to be shooting, because we know it's been in the works and been confirmed, but it feels like they got a pretty good handle on the script now.
Yeah, she gave some praise to the writers about what they've written. Of course, it's going to be about a female soccer team that they kind of hinted at at the end of season 3 and stuff. So, but she praised what they've written, and we know season 3 took quite a while to write and get out. So they must have found something that they really connected with and got into, because it was February when we first heard rumblings about it, and they're about to film in July. So they got some stuff knocked out for that. But it's another one that I'm hesitant on, but if it's got the core writers and actors behind it, because Jason Sudeikis was one of the main creators and writers on it, along with, our Roy Kent being in there as well in the writer's room. If they've knocked out a story that they want to come back to, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that it's going to be worth coming back to visit, because we kind of left in a solid way that we left them all. But it's such a good series that it's so good. It doesn't hurt to go back to it as long as they've got it right. Like, you still want that charm, as long as the women, they're just not trying to, all right, here's our Roy, here's our just Jamie, here's everything. We're just going to they need to be their own people and their own characters and not trying to restart that. But I'm really looking forward and interested to see what it'd be. We don't know a timeline on release yet. That could it be end of this year? More than likely, probably maybe early next year we'd see it. That, because I think they were about 8 to 10, maybe 8 episodes, I think.
Somewhere around the 10 to 12 episode seasons, I believe the last couple seasons were. And as long as they've got the heart behind the series still, fantastic writing is always. Brett Goldstein's got such a keen sense of humor, and he's so funny.
I've got to watch his HBO special that he did.
That's one I plan on watching later today for sure. And it's just to go back and revisit, because I got to see his comedy tour that he's doing the special of when he came through here. That
I didn't get tickets. He got tickets. I didn't get tickets.
Hey, listen. It was worth it. It was worth the time. Yeah. He is so funny. And, if you get a chance to check out his special, if you have, Max or HBO Max as they're going back to, that's a whole other...
Whatever it's called anymore.
Whatever they're going to call it in 3 months whenever you watch this episode. It could be something completely
Max
different.
HBO.
It could be. It could just be OB Max or something. You just never know. It could be
HBO Max presented by Zwack.
It could be at that point. That company is just off the rails at this point.
I did like it, going off on our little tangent on it here, that they've embraced that they know how ridiculous it is, because they've had, I think John Cena was doing a promo for Peacemaker the next season. He's like, oh, I'm going to remove everything that says Max now, and it's HBO Max now. So I'm going to see HBO. Like, they've had their different casts and stuff come out kind of making fun of it, and James Gunn make fun of it. Like, they know that's kind of ridiculous. Apparently, it was either David Zaslav or somebody was just all in, like, oh, we're just going to change it. Max is going to be awesome. It's going to be great, and it's going to be fantastic for everybody. And everybody else in the company said, no, this is a bad idea. HBO is the brand that you need to be keeping up and not Max. Like, oh, we're just going to change to Max. And 6 months, a year later, we're back to being HBO Max.
It's a hot mess, but at least they're meta about it and poking fun at themselves and how absurd it is, kind of take the sting away from it, but it's just absurd.
I did see a clip from Brett's special where he was talking about, like, I got to do Sesame Street, and I'm just afraid if one day I have a kid and they ask me, Daddy, was the day I was born the greatest day of your life? Nope. It's when I did Sesame Street. He legitimately just absolutely loves Sesame Street, and the characters are, you're not Big Bird. So, like, no.
It's a very funny bit. He is very funny and hilarious. Just a keen sense for writing, but having those people back to, write the new season of Ted Lasso, there's nothing really changing at the top, which makes me believe that they'll have the care and take the care and tell us a good story that, just hopefully, fingers crossed, can maintain that charm and love and incredible writing that they had for the first 3 seasons of that show. And we'll see if season 4, picks that ball up and runs with it, or kicks the ball and runs with it, because you can't use your hands in football. But, it's something that I cannot wait for the day that comes out, because that's going to be very exciting.
I just hope Hannah actually has time to film it, because, as we say, she's in everything right now,
in
which
demand.
Rightfully
Love
so.
that for her. She's phenomenal as Rebecca in that show, and just amazing in everything she's in. So it's exciting to have her back on board for that too. But yeah, man, what a run she's on right now, man. Because both of our movies we're getting ready to talk about, she makes an appearance in. It's a good week for her. If you know anything about box office stuff and follow that stuff like we do, a huge weekend, potentially the biggest Memorial Day weekend box office of all time, which is insane, given how many great films have come out around this time of year, and this could potentially be the biggest one ever. That gives me such joy, as big advocates for the theater as you and I are, that is the case this week. And just, it was so cool to see the theater packed, full of people having a good time. The crowds were great. They were, well behaved for the movies that I went to. I know you and I went and saw Mission Impossible together, but we went and saw, Lilo and Stitch separately, but couldn't speak enough praise to how, the environment that we were in this weekend was awesome. People just having a great time and out in the theaters, and I'm so thankful to see that.
Yeah, it just felt like the movies are back. So yeah, let's jump right in, kick off with Lilo and Stitch. This is the first film we're going to review today. Of course, this is a live-action adaptation of the classic animated. That's one of my favorites. Like Aladdin, Lion King, those are up there at the tops. Of Lilo and Stitch is right up there with it, because it was fun, it was quirky, it was just something different and interesting. Phenomenal. And so, we know Disney hasn't had a great run with their live action. Most of them have been pretty mediocre, on a scale of 1 to 10, most of them probably fall to 5 to 7. Like, they're not the greatest. Because I think the biggest thing is they've been missing the heart. Yep. They've been missing what made those animated films magical. Yep. And I think Lilo and Stitch is probably the closest they've gotten so far of capturing some of that animated magic. It still has its issues because they made quite a lot of changes. So there's already some controversy about all those changes and everything online. Some I can see, others are just people being nitpicky. But overall, I had a lot of fun with it. Such my family, my kids had a lot of fun with it too. And I've got to give it up for Maya, who plays Lilo. I think that's the closest you could get to getting a live action Lilo. Like, she had the spunk, she had the attitude, she had the fierceness and everything behind her. And I even think Sydney as Nani was great as well. Like, there's some people who are complaining that she wasn't thick enough like the cartoon. Like, this is a kid's cartoon. You're complaining about.
Relax, internet. Jesus Christ.
But I think they were fantastic, and they had a great dynamic between each other.
Yeah, it's so good though, man, because this is, minor changes aside, this is as close of a faithful adaptation of a live action adaptation of an animated feature that they've probably put out to this point. Like, you have the same core basic story where Lilo is this eccentric young girl who has like a wild and crazy imagination that makes her socially awkward with people, and people have a hard time understanding her, and she's kind of she's kind of isolated and lonely, and dealing with a very real tragic situation that Lilo and Nani have to deal with, the fallout of their parents passing in a horrific car accident, and them being left to kind of Nani being forced into this motherly type role for Lilo here, and they keep a lot of that heart in this film. And yeah, there's some minor tweaks and stuff that they do between the live action and the animated. Like, they've come out and said, one of the big complaints that people had was the lack of Captain Gantu, who played a pretty big role in the animated feature, where they've come out and said, the CG and things that would have taken to make it weren't really coming along the way they wanted to.
So I think he's like a 7 to 8 foot tall shark creature.
Right. It's hard to make that work in the film that they were trying to do. But for the most part, a lot of it was almost identical to the animated feature, really. A lot of the same stories, a lot of the same jokes, the music, which is unbelievable music in this, the island themes and those Caribbean type sounds,
giving us the Elvis song still.
Yeah, you get the inclusion of Elvis in here too. Like, a lot of that heart and depth is to it. The relationship between Nani and Lilo in this is phenomenal as well. You just see the the banter back and forth, and there's a lot of the famous, like, one of the things that I'm so glad they kept was that initial interaction of Lilo leaving the dance place and going back to their home, Nani finding her there, and she's kind of moping around, and they have their back and forth bickering. Mm-hmm. Like, I liked you more as a sister. I like you more as a sister than a mother. And like, go to your room. I'm already at my room. And they slam the doors, and they both yell on the pillows. It makes me laugh every time I see it in the animated feature, but they kept that in there, and I was so happy about that. But
even the dark line of her laying on the floor saying, "Just leave me here to die."
Yeah,
or what. I forget
so
the
dramatic,
line exactly, but so dramatic. She delivered that
amazing.
Just great.
She was so good in this film, and some of the minor tweaks that they made, obviously, like, I love Tia Carrera coming back and being the social worker in this one, and it wasn't Cobra Bubbles, but Cobra Bubbles does have a very prominent role in
Tia
this.
was the original voice for Nani in the animated movie.
And now she gets to play the social worker in the live action film. Love that inclusion of her there to kind of pay some respect to the animated feature too. And it was a lot of fun, man. It has that heart, it has that oomph. Love that they brought the original Stitch voice actor to voice Stitch in this too. So you have that continuity between the two, that iconic Stitch voice that I know you do so well that your kids love.
Kids always asking me to do Stitch.
I love it. It's so good. Do it for him real quick. Give him a little something.
How dare you?
Dance monkey.
Put me on the spot here.
Dance monkey.
Ohana means family. Family means nobody gets left behind.
See,
or forgotten.
That's what I'm talking about. See, it just doesn't.
My youngest wants me to do the cute and fluffy all the time because I'm so cute and fluffy. Like, she wants me to do that.
I love that. That's so good. You're so good at doing that. But it's. But you have that continuity in this film. It's fun. It's a really good movie. I love kind of the updated, Hawaiian roller coaster ride song that they did with I Am Tangi from American Idol. They got to do that. He did a phenomenal job with that song. But it's got a lot of that same heart and charm in it. And it's a really well done film that I think puts it at the upper echelon of the live action films that they've done. And it's so good. It's got that heart. It's got that punch of emotion. It's got that humor, that fun, that sense of fun to it as well, that really makes it a really good and almost completely faithful adaptation of the original, minus the minor tweaks that they made to it. But for the most part, you're getting the same story. And if you wanted that, you're getting that here.
That's always a hard part, because like, if they do the 1-to-1, then everyone's gonna like, well, why even do it? Because you're just making exactly the same. Oh, you made changes. Why didn't you just make the movie that it? Okay, yeah, you can't win. Like, I can see some of the changes here being some problems. So we're going to get into a little bit more spoilery stuff here of the changes they made. Like, because we got Jamba he was kind of always a little bit of a villain in the first one, but he gets a redemption arc in the end, that he sees the connection and the family and stuff. But he kind of gets a combined role of Gantu and Jamba together, that he just becomes kind of a straight villain. And as much as I like Zach Galifianakis, I don't think his Jamba was as memorable as the animated series. I mean, of course, we had the Russian accent and everything else, and he was just doing his voice. It was okay. Like, I don't think his Jamba was great. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't memorable in a way that the original original was and stuff. Fair. I do like the Pleakley. Like, I think he did a good job of bringing that. Of course, some people are mad that he wasn't in the dress. He was wearing a fishnet shirt with a flower on it and other stuff. Like, he got his eccentric stuff in there. We know some things change. I even think cutting Gontu was probably like, in live action, especially doing a CG version of him, would be kind of scary to kids. Sure. I don't think he would have been really menacing. Of course, all the flight and action fights where Lilo's been put into the glass, like all that just kind of doesn't make as much sense in live action because you're putting a child in that much danger and stuff for the movie. So I think removing Gontu wasn't as big as a problem. I think not having that kind of redemption for Jamba was kind of a little bit of an issue for me. You also kind of lost a little bit of the love story between David and Nani. Like, it's lightly touched on that they like each other and they go into the end, but it's that was less prominent in there. I do want to bring up that we did get Jason Scott Lee, who was the original voice of David. He is in the film as well. He plays her manager, her boss at the beach restaurant and stuff, so it was great to see him again in that. So you got the two kind of main voices and stuff from the animated movie in there. And yeah, as you said, we got the original Stitch back, who was the writer and director of the original animated film as well. But I enjoyed it past those, kind of change. I think the biggest problem with Jamba just didn't... You made him more of a straight villain. You didn't get his redemption where he realizes he was kind of wrong of what he... He created this experiment. All he cares is about going back and making it into the weapon that he thought it was. And by the end of the animated film, he gets that realization, like, okay, he's a living creature who's found a family. He's got this, like, because he's helping rebuild the house. He's doing everything. And here, you just get him being a straight villain.
Yeah, I get that criticism a little bit, but I still think it's done in a more practical way in the live action, because, like you said, there's just some elements that don't make sense for you to incorporate into a live action versus how they do it, because you can get away with a lot more, obviously, with animation than you can in real practical settings. But yeah, it was so good. Like they do a good job of keeping that heart, man. And I think that's where they were more successful than most when it comes to these live adaptations.
They nailed Nani and Lilo. That gave it the heart that it needed.
Because you felt the pain, and you kind of felt like, I think Nani had probably the biggest shift as far as like where she was going, because obviously we'll spoil it a little bit here, but in the animated feature, she's just focused on being a good provider for Lilo and, helping them build a good life. Whereas here, she's got a little bit more of an ambition to be a marine biologist and go and study. And, those types of things weren't available to her, with the passing of her parents. And
I love the joke of Lilo calling her a Marine, that she wants to go be a Marine. Like, no,
go join the Marines.
A marine biologist is completely different.
Yeah, and then you have the inclusion of, David's mom, like a heavier.
She's always fantastic in everything she's in. But I just had to crack up of her being on a quad and gunning it up the hill.
So serious. It's so serious when she needs to be. And she was fantastic in this too, but kind of making that a little bit of a twist in how they end the film with where, the characters go and everything, and more fantastical uses of portals and other things like that, that they added to, kind of lighten it up a little bit too. But like I said, at the end of the day, you're getting that heart, that family, bond, you're feeling for Stitch, and Stitch is learning that, you're not bad, you just do bad things sometimes. Like, in him learning and evolving like he did in the animated feature, you have the heart of those stories in here captured in a wonderful and well done way that you can kind of forgive some of the other creative liberties that they took with it and kind of slightly altering the story at the end. And
I do see some people potentially having some problems with the end because, again, this is going to be kind of heavy spoilers. We end up with the discussion that happens in here that's not really in the animated series is that Nani is thinking about giving Lilo up to fostering because she is struggling. She can't find the job. She can't pay her bills. She's got all this that she can't do. And anybody who knows about fostering, done with fostering, it's a long, difficult, heavy kind of process. And they kind of just change it up to, well, she still kind of gives Lilo up, but it's to David's mom and right next door. But it's kind of like, well, couldn't she just help out more? It's like, I can see people having the problem of just how the whole film is about Ohana means family and nobody gets left behind, but she kind of gives up Lilo. Like, she's not leaving behind because we know she's going to go to college. She's trying to better herself so she can come back and be something for Lilo, but you're looking at a 4-year degree or more that she's trying to do. She's got the portals that she can come back and forth and see her, but it's still, in the end, when you get to, if you think of it at the end, like, she gives Lilo up to foster care. Even though she's going right next door, it's still like it's trying to give depth to Nani, that she has a life she needs to live too, and I get that and stuff, but I can see plenty of people may have problems with how it ends because, well, Ohana means family. Well, you're giving her up to foster, but it's kind of it just kind of weird in a way. Like, I didn't hate it, but I can see a lot of people having problems with it.
Yeah, I mean, she was kind of in an impossible situation. Like, their house gets destroyed, and yeah, you don't have the rebuilding of that necessarily by the end of this movie that you do in the other one, but you know, you gotta. It made sense to tell that in a modern way. There, like, you know, it's a very real situation that some people find themselves in, and I thought it was represented fairly well. But I get it. Like, I can see the argument making that she technically gives her up, but she really doesn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like she's going somewhere far away or somewhere that, you know, she doesn't know where she's going. She's going with a trusted family relative to kind of help her out while Nani can get her life in order to come back. And, you know, eventually you got to hope and pray that, you know, she's successful in her studies and she can come back and be the provider for Lilo until, you know, Lilo's old enough to go on her own, you know, go on her path. Like, that's a very real and practical thing that I could see happening, and you can kind of infer that from the end. But, like, it's like you're not really going that far. You're going right across the street to these people who are like family anyway to kind of help watch out for you, and I'm literally one portal away from showing up, like, whenever I need to. So I get it, but at the same time, it doesn't really hold a lot of weight. That
it's just a subject matter about fostering and everything else, and what the meaning of the movie is. Like I said, I didn't necessarily have the problem with it, but I can see it being a problem for a lot of people watching this. Of just like, well, yeah, it's all about never leaving anybody behind, but technically she kind of leaves. But it's a twist in here because it's like in the original animated series, Nani kind of leaves herself behind.
Yeah.
Because it's all about Lilo and it's all about that. And now she's getting a chance to try to live her life because she's supposed to be 17 to 19, somewhere in that range. Still a teenager, very young and stuff. So she's got a life to live. So I do like that added depth that they're giving her a little bit more. But like I said, I see others could have a problem with kind of that foster ending to it. But it was nice that it was the original voice of Nani who was kind of playing the advocate to help her and arrange that meeting, arrange that to be the next door neighbor instead of being her just being gone into a foster system, because that's very different than just going to a next door neighbor, than going into the rough foster system.
Yeah, and, you know, it allows everybody to kind of have the ending that they need to have, you know, because, like you said, she's being taken care of by, you know, the family friend while Nani's getting her life in order too. Like, it comes, and a lot of people find themselves in situations similar to that, where they lean on family, they lean on, you know, people close to them to kind of help them out in these situations. So I think it was fine in the sense that it was a very practical, real world application to a situation that is not as easily explained in an animated setting. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's very easy to snap your fingers and everything's hunky-dory in an animated feature, where you can have that narrative in real world, and it felt like a very real, practical solution that, you know, is told and makes sense for the story that they told in the movie. Yeah. So, like you said, I could see why people could have a bit of an issue if they're wanting a significantly more faithful adaptation of the story, but I feel like you're nitpicking at the end for that, and I didn't have an issue with it at all.
Like I said, I could see it, but I didn't exactly have it. I mean, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of it, it's like, okay, yeah, she did kind of give her up, but she's a young girl that needs to get her life together, and she clearly hasn't been able to do it with Lilo. So it's a situation that you could see the pain and anguish of her doing it, so they didn't make it be a very easy choice in the film for her to do.
And I will say that she wouldn't have done it had they not supported her and encouraged her to do it.
Yeah.
She was very dead set on making it work and not pursuing this. Like, it's not just, oh, she just gives Lilo up willy-nilly. Like, she wasn't going to do it.
And that was the last point I was going to bring up, because it was Lilo told her to do it. Would be basically grandma
She's
to
like
her, would tell her, told her, do it. You need to live your life and stuff. And by the amount of money it's making and what it's looking at, they're already talking about a sequel. So, if you're fans of Lilo Stitch, they did, I think, 2 film sequels, and then they had the animated series and stuff. So they have a lot to go off of, or they could go off on their own and figure out, because you do kind of have a different and new ending to, are we going to jump ahead that Nani is done with, school, and she comes back and they're trying to build a life back together, and she's trying to get Lilo back or something. Do we get Leroy introduced and get the other and Angel and get all those introduced into this world and everything? There's a lot they could do with the sequel, depending on where they want to go. It is, Nani going to still be in school, but she has to come back and help because new alien creatures have shown up or something like that. Could they put Gantu in the sequel or something, if they feel like he could come back and be some sort of like rogue agent who doesn't like what the Grand Councilwoman, which was Hannah Waddingham, who did fantastic. I mean, she was probably the closest to being animated as possible. Like, she sounded and acted and was pretty much exactly like the Grand Councilwoman in the animated film. So almost if you want somebody who was pretty much identical to the animated film, it was the Grand Councilwoman. But Hannah Waddingham was fantastic as her. But there's a lot they could do with the sequel, and with how much money it's making, even though they're kind of taking a step back because of how all the other films have been received. This one could be one that gets a long run in live action.
I would say, with as successful as it's already setting up to be, there's next to zero chance they won't follow it up.
It made its budget back between Thursday previews and Friday opening. It already made its budget,
which is insane. It's going to make so much money. It's got the chance to be $1 billion film. Like, it's got a chance, and there aren't a ton of those, but with the positive buzz that it's gotten from people and just a flock of people going to see it over the weekend, wouldn't surprise me if it's pushing $1 billion at the box office, which is insane. But it's a very practical possibility for this film, because you've got a little bit of a lull for a couple weeks of things coming out, but at the same time, like, this is got the potential for some saving power. I want to see it again. I will see it again. It may not be in theaters, but
me and my family are going to be watching it.
Definitely one that, as soon as it's ready to stream, we're gonna watch that. And it's so well done. But they'd be crazy with as much money as it's making not to try to do it again. Whether or not the sequel's any good, that's a problem for down the road. But I think they did a fine enough job with this one that it makes sense for them to try to follow it up, because there are so many other things, like you said, that they did beyond the first animated film that you can draw on for a second feature film. So we'll see what direction they go.
Yeah, so the live action Lilo and Stitch is a fun, enjoyable adaptation of the animated film. They made plenty of changes. Some didn't work as well, while others worked just fine. But I had a good time with it. My kids absolutely loved it. As I normally do with family films, as I took flack for it with Snow White and stuff, I add extra points to it because of my kids' enjoyment, because in the end, that's who really matters when it comes to these type of films. But they did Stitch well, and Maya and Sydney were fantastic as Nani and Lilo. Like, they were the heart and the core of it, and that was the most important part, is getting them right, and I think they did a fantastic job. I'm going to end up giving this an 8, so that's with my kids, extra scores in there as well. I think they did a solid job. Yes, there's a lot of changes. Yes, there's the Foster stuff and everything else that they mix in, but I think it worked for what they were doing here in live action, and you still got a happy ending, and you got a lot of stuff. Like, I didn't care as much for Jamba. Of course, Zach Galifianakis was a voice. I think he was a little bit wasted on the character, and they made him more of a straight villain in it. But I think overall it was a fun, enjoyable, and the best live action that Disney has done for one of their properties.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to give it an 8 all on my own as well. Like, I don't nitpick these films that much when it comes to, making a live action adaptation, only because you have to find a ways to take these and make these work practically. And you get bonus points from me if you're successful in doing so. And I think they did a good job of that in this film. Like you said, the heart of the story is there. The same heart, the same message, the same familial love that you get from Lilo and Stitch, you get in the live action film. So they get major points from me for keeping the heart of it, which, like we talked about before, is not something that's always present in these live action remakes, where visually it looks good, it could be somewhat well acted, the music could be okay, but you're missing some of that heart. This has it. It has the heart. It's got great music. It's got, everything that you love from the first one, minus a few character tweaks and a couple like minor narrative tweaks that didn't really bother me as much as it may bother some other people. So I'm giving it an 8, and I'm willing to stand on my review for that, because it's really good, really well done. And for me, I like to give a little bit of extra points if it's a movie that I want to see more than once. Like if it's something that I want to see once and review it and we're like, okay, and it's not something I'm going to actively seek out to see again, like it might get a little bit of a knock points wise for me, but this is a film I very much plan on watching more than once. Like it's going to be a multiple viewing film for me, and for that I have to boost it up a little bit and give it, a little extra love for that. And I think the rewatchability for this is going to be super high. We see how well it's doing at the box office. If you follow those things, this was made for about $100 million, and it's pushing well over $120 million for the weekend, even higher. We're waiting on the final.
Yeah, they're looking at it might get close to $200 million. It could be close to $200
million, which is insane and a great opening. And I've seen nothing but positive buzz from people in the theater going to see it. In my experience, like I heard the kids, who are the focal point of this film. By the way, this isn't a film necessarily made for adults. I'm not saying adults can get some enjoyment.
It might have been from our childhood, but this is for the kids who are maybe singing for the first time.
Right. And they were nothing but like, I heard, that was awesome, Mom. Can we watch it again? Like I heard that several times that we don't always get walking out of a theater, and just hearing that positive buzz and excitement was really heartwarming for me. So I'm more than happy to give it an 8, and, go see this film, go see it in theaters. It's such a fun familial viewing experience. I don't always advocate for seeing films in 3D, but if they have 3D showings, visually it could be pretty good in 3D. Like I'm not a big fan of that personally, but the way they shot this film and the way it looks, I think could lend itself to a fun 3D experience if that's something that you're into. But ton of fun, man. It was so good. I had a lot of fun watching this film.
The biggest controversy, your opinion. It was Hawaiian shaved ice instead of ice cream. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm always.
I've actually heard people complain that the ice cream guy is in the movie. Well, he's doing shaved ice instead. Like, come on.
It's the internet. You can't have nice things on the internet. But yeah, I get it. I'm always going to be an ice cream guy personally, if you're asking me for a personal preference. But honestly, I didn't even pay that much attention to the fact that it was that different. I'm like, okay, who cares?
He dropped his stuff twice.
It's like, the same
that's
thing.
All we needed.
The same note is there. Get over it, internet. Do better. Jesus Christ. But there's people that'll get online just to nitpick something to just get over there and.
Yep.
This made me upset. Do better. Stop it.
So Lilo and Stitch is in theaters right now. Go check it out with your family, by yourself, whatever. Go check out this film. It is the best live action adaptation that Disney has done of their property. They're stepping back a little bit, which for good measure. Most of them have not been very good. We do have one more that they already had in production, which is Moana, is going to be out next year. We'll see exactly if that works out in live action, which it could. But that's also another one that'll have plenty of controversy, because you have Dwayne Johnson is back being Maui, but you don't have the same actress for Moana, and we'll see how that end up going. But that could be past if they do another Lilo and Stitch. Could be one of the last live action that they do.
It could be for a while, but this is, if they go out with these, it's a good one to end it on. And I just can't imagine them not following up with a sequel as commercially successful as this one's going to be. There's almost zero chance that they don't go back to that well for this one.
Absolutely.
They may stay away from other properties, but this one seems to hit the nail on the head. So hopefully they can follow it up with something successful too. But now I want to move us into our other film review of the week. We have Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. This is, by all accounts, until somebody tells us differently, the last Mission Impossible movie, at least featuring Ethan Hunt, the character played by Tom Cruise. So that's not to say they may not reboot it with another character. There's been some reports that say potentially Tom Cruise is willing to bless them moving on if they cast somebody like Glenn Powell as a lead role in it, obviously with their ties from Top Gun Maverick and, other things like that. But this is the supposed final film featuring Ethan Hunt. And if this is going to be the final film that you have Ethan Hunt in, they tie everything up in the best way possible for him, for his story here. Because if you're all about taking a character over multiple films, finding ways to raise the stakes, I don't think you can raise them any higher than the way they were raised in this film. So this is a direct follow-up to Dead Reckoning, which came out a couple years ago, and them dealing with this existential crisis known as the Entity that they're trying to stop, that's kind of taking over all of society here.
Rogue AI.
Yeah, it's just rogue artificial intelligence, very apt for the time that we're living in, obviously. But, this film is all about Ethan doing literally anything and everything it takes to stop this entity from taking over all of the nuclear missiles on the planet and just kind of wiping humanity off the face of the earth to kind of rebuild society in a way that they do. It's very Ultron-esque, I would say, as a way of describing this in Marvel terms for all you comic book nerds like myself out there. But it's very much got that type of stakes to it where all of existence is on the line. And one of the things that's heavy in Mission Impossible for a character like Ethan Hunt is he's willing to do whatever it takes as long as it doesn't sacrifice anybody that's, close in his close circle of
people. He'll sacrifice himself, but not his friends and those close to him.
Correct. And this is kind of his reckoning, for lack of a better term, of willing to be able to kind of let go of that a little bit in order to get done what needs to get done. And that's kind of the crux and the message behind the entire film all the way through. So you get that theme very much prominent throughout the film here.
Yeah, and Mission Impossible is one that I've said before that it's been one of the most consistent big action blockbuster films for so long. Sure. Like, this has been around since 1996, and we know there's some that are lesser and stuff, but it's starting with like Mission Impossible 3 to 4. That's when it really kicked off what we know of Mission Impossible right now, and it's been so consistent and good storytelling, incredible action, everything else. Like, I'm going to nitpick this film just a little bit, just because it's kind of the most straightforward in a way of story. You don't have a ton of twists and turns with it. Not a lot of mystery. It's the goal is, well, he needs to get this key to where the source code is of the entity so they can shut it down. But the U.S. government, you have a few of them want to get it for power, and then you also have Gabriel. And I think Gabriel's probably one of the weakest things about the movie, because you don't get a lot of depth to him. He was introduced in Dead Reckoning as a guy who killed someone close to Ethan before he was part of IMF, which is what got him into the IMF. Right. But past that, he's just a guy who's obsessed with the entity. Like, he's able to connect with the entity somehow. Like, we know the device and everything, so we get to see it used here in Final Reckoning and stuff, and we know that connection to Ethan. But past that, that's kind of all we know. Like, everything he does is based on basically premonition, because Doctor Strange, aka the entity, has told him every possible scenario for everything to happen, and that's what he's basing everything off of. Why he tells, well, someone has to die, it's either you or you, or someone has to die, it's you or you. But he's kind of weak past that. Like, he knows combat, he knows how to fly, he knows all this stuff, but we don't really, he's been in 2 films now, but we know his name is Gabriel, and we know he had something to do with bringing Ethan into this world. But past that, he's a kind of a very thin villain.
Very thin. There's not a lot of depth to his character at all. Very thin. And he does a fine job of playing the character to a point, but yeah, he's a very thin villain. But you can kind of also make the argument there's a lot of like frenemy relationships that have been built over the years. Like, Kittredge, I would argue, is just as much of a villain in this film as Gabriel is.
He's kind of always been a villain.
Like, he's kind of always, but yeah, they've kind of been always helpful.
He's a good guy,
helpful.
but a villain.
Yeah. But that's the type of relationship that I'm talking about. But I would say at the heart of this film is not just trying to stop the entity from, taking over all of the nukes and wiping out the face of humanity, which is a very real and existential threat that they're dealing with. But it's also a huge love letter to the history of Mission Impossible, almost parodying like a Mission Impossible Endgame, if you want to call it that, because you get so many callbacks and flashbacks to all the things that happen, and they try to shoehorn a lot of things together that makes sense if you've watched every single film and tied into.
Which I did go back. I know you didn't. I went back and watched 1 through 7 again before I watched Final Reckoning. Did you go back and watch any of them?
I did not. But I mean, I'm pretty good at remembering plot.
I knew them, but I wanted to revisit them.
The intricate details of every single film, I'm not going to remember for this, but they flash back a lot of stuff that happens over it. You get some pretty fun, in my opinion, cameos of kind of very short-lived characters. Even a very prominent one from Mission Impossible 1 even is very helpful in this film. Like, you get kind of this love letter to the entire series where you get the flashbacks, you get the full circle moments for some characters, you get like a ton of stuff like coming to a conclusion. I want to give a huge flowers to Ving Rhames for his performance in this film, because him being Luther and being kind of off and on prominently featured throughout this was just fantastic with some of the dialogue he was given in this.
He was the
film.
second longest running actor past Tom Cruise in this entire series.
He made his debut in the first one. Like, he's been around from the jump and not as prominently featured in every film, but like he plays a big part in the last couple, at least for sure. And you get, like, he got his flower moment here too, and he got an incredible monologue, and just, I want to hear that man voice so many things because he's got such a cool voice. Obviously, the running gag now is, he's got the voice for Arby's.
Wasn't he the original Cobra Bubbles too, or he
was the original Cobra Bubbles voice too? Yes, it's kind of tying into Lilo and Stitch too. But I love that voice though. Like, he's just got this presence. Like, when he speaks, it's just very captivating and very soothing on the ears. Like, he's just got such an incredible voice. But he has a really cool moment in this as well. And like you said, a big part of this is Ethan kind of relinquishing a little bit of control, but still willing to do some of the most outlandish things you've ever seen. Like, if you thought, like, it was almost Fast and Furious comical levels of ways that he was able to get things done where he needs to. And that's kind of where I want to nitpick on the film a little bit, because extreme stunts have always been kind of a calling card for this franchise. Like, Tom Cruise, feel however you want about the man in his personal life, is willing to throw his body through everything to make these films, does all of his own stunts still, phenomenal job of like just giving everything he literally physically can to these roles. And they put him through some unbelievable stuff that was almost cartoonish, I think, and that's where I'm going to nitpick the film a little bit. It gets ridiculous, some of the premises of like, okay, you have to do, this is the only way this is going to work. You have to be in this square meter range of this thing at this exact time, and all of these other things have to be very specific and down to the finite detail for this to even possibly have a 1/10% of a chance to work. And they just go over the top of expounding like how impossible these are, being Mission Impossible.
Making sure that that this mission
is actually impossible and not, there's no way this could possibly happen. And they crank that up to a kind of cartoonish level here.
It does get Fast and Furious type of level.
Way more over the top than you've seen in other films, where you can get to some of the absurd, like, you get some of the fun mask stuff that you get like kind of early on in the film, but like those are all fun and good, but this is just dialed it up to 25 on.
Does get him almost superhuman
on the ridiculous scale. Yeah, he's almost like an indestructible entity into himself here, which, okay, hero trope I get, but like just some of the absurd stuff, they're like, there's no possible way, like, who comes up with this stuff to make it like this down to the finite detail, which kudos to you for being creative enough to come up with it. But it got cartoonish and a little bit like it kind of fried my brain a little bit, just kind of like, okay, like, this doesn't make any sense to, you have to do this, this, and this in order for this to work. And it's just absurd set of circumstances. They're like, there's no way this could possibly happen to coordinate on a level to make this work. And I get it. You're supposed to suspend some disbelief for the sake of the film and the story, but even this was a bit much and a bit heavy-handed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've got a few nitpicks with them. Like, I enjoyed it. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it at all. There hasn't really been a bad Mission Impossible past maybe one of them, which we are actually, after we're done with this review, we're going to go over our rankings. Like, we're going to see exactly where each film sits in our enjoyment level with it. But, like, as you said, they do flashback and tell you pretty much everything that's happened in every Mission Impossible film up to this point, which was good but also bad. The first hour and a half almost of this nearly 3 hour film was flashbacks. It was taking you back to the past and stuff. Like, a little bit could have been good and been solid, but when you hit the hour mark and you're still flashing back and you're still going through that, it was a little too much to me. It was, you could have trimmed 30 to 45 minutes from this movie and it would have just been trimming flashbacks. It helped, but it didn't really. Yeah. And I do get that the action sequences did get a little cartoonish. So he makes it to the sub, and which is supposed to be like 300 to 500 feet underneath the water, and he's able to go through with torpedoes clanking around and everything else, and he escapes out. Cartoonish. And he, as you said, he has a very precise location he has to try to go. He's got a tracker on and everything, but a very precise where they have to be. And the sub has rolled and moved and gone everywhere else, so his location's changed. He's gone down even further than he was before, but he's able to go without a suit in ice-cold ocean water that far down, which is even colder, make it to the surface, be revived, all that stuff again. We're going spoilers, you know kind of what we do. Like, we'll talk spoiler-free, but we'll get into it. And he's able to survive, but then, Grace is able to be in the decompression chamber with him, which that would have messed her up being in because it just kind of you've got to suspend some disbelief. And even the airplane fight towards the end and stuff was like, okay, so we already had Gabriel foreshadow that, I brought a couple planes with me because I brought a backup. Why would he bring a backup? Wouldn't he have seen from the entity that getting a second plane gives Ethan a chance? Because if he only brought one plane, he would have got away and all that. And even, so after they have the key and stuff, the plan is that they need a way to trap the entity. And the only place they could possibly trap the entity is in the Doomsday Vault that has everything of human history recorded and set. And so they head out to go there, but everyone is left. So the most secure place on the planet that has all the information of everything in the entire world, and they leave it open. Not even just, they didn't close the doors and lock up and leave. They left every door wide open to the most secure place in the planet where anybody and everybody can just walk right in. So that was also another suspend disbelief because Gabriel's able to show up and plant a bomb and set up traps and go around, and even with getting the bomb, we got about 10 seconds that we can make it to that door over there before a megaton bomb goes off and get in there. And we know the door didn't fully close because we had blowback came into there. Right. But it was just like, you had to, this one more than anything, he's always kind of been cartoonish, but this one, more than anything, turned him into like an indestructible superhero. Like the stuff that happened, maybe one person would have survived everything that happened here. And it's kind of got a little too much suspending disbelief with it. And then it's the final Mission Impossible film, but it doesn't really end as a final. It gets a decent solid ending, but it leaves open that there could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. It ended, but it didn't end it. We know with the last James Bond that ended definitively. We know that was the end, and that kind of feels like what the Mission Impossible series might end up being. Like, once Tom Cruise is fully done being Ethan, they'll probably recast and reboot, and it'll turn into a James Bond type of character. We'll just get reboots after so long and stuff, because he says he's going to act and do everything till he's 100, and when he can't do it anymore. So it being a final film, being 3 hours, you've got to look at Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning almost as one movie, because it does continue the same story. Like, all the stories are connected throughout here, other than the first and second one are a little more disconnected from the rest, but they all have a connection. But these two, originally it was a part 1 and a part 2. It still is, even though they have different names, it's still a part 1 and a part 2. So when you look at something that's 6 hours long with the story they told, this second 3 hours was, it could have been tightened up a lot better. It told two major events, and that was kind of it. And that's where I can get nitpicky, that it could have trimmed 45 minutes off of this film and been a lot better and a lot tighter. And it did go really cartoonish with a lot of the stuff. Like you have to really suspend disbelief in this one more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I get the whole point. They could have easily saved a good 30 plus minutes off of this movie to, not beat everybody over the head with the flashbacks and all of the things that kind of tie it together. But I can't imagine there's a ton of people that have been invested in this series as long as it's been around, and this is their first jump into Mission Impossible at this point. But I get them trying to pay homage to everything that's happened. So if they're going to go out, you kind of figure they're going out doing what they want and kind of writing this, like I said, this ending love letter to Mission Impossible and what it's been for the last almost 30 years. Like, this franchise has been around almost 30 years. Like,
which they hint at in the movie. Insane. It's like, yeah, when was the last time we saw each other? It's about 30 years ago.
Right, which is crazy. Some of the really cool, one of my favorite throwbacks was the character that spends a good chunk of the film helping and was kind of a not so kind of what felt like a throwaway character in the first film. And he kind of comes and is a cool, like, I appreciate kind of like stuff like that where it's like,
yeah, that was fine.
It's him. Like, that was fun. That was cool. But yeah, they could have easily shaved a good 30 minutes off of this film with all of the flashbacks and the just beating you over the head with, hey, remember this is what happened? Hey, remember this is what happened? They allude to something and they literally show the flashback of when it happened to kind of, like you said, just beat you over the head with the references. And that's fine to a point, but I really felt like it kind of took away from the film a little bit sometimes with all of the over-the-top stuff that they did with it. But, at the end, it's still solid action. Like, what the action that we get in it is phenomenal. It's fantastic, shot beautifully, absurd, over the top. Visually, it's still stunning to look at. Like, they do good job. They do a good job of portraying that in these films, and it's really cool. I've missed a little bit of that spy element that you don't get as much. As much anymore with these films that really, like, I loved about the original first one. It felt so much more like a spy show, and it was based off of a spy show. Like, and it had that, and it became a little bit more of a big blockbuster over the top action film, which is great. Like, and spoiler alert, a little minor spoiler, but before we get into our rankings, like, I hold the newer movies in higher regard than I do the older ones. But, like, I wish they'd have delved a little bit more into the spy element, especially in this one, to kind of wrap it up, and it's not as prominent. But
as I said, there wasn't as much as the mystery and intrigue and the spy stuff. It just basically, we knew what was going to happen from Dead Reckoning, and it was just kind of very linear to get there.
Yeah, which is in some ways okay, but I think it could have used a little bit more oomph to it. But, like I said, if this is going to be the end of the line for Ethan Hunt, which I agree, they kind of left it open, like, you don't get the hard definitive out that you got with the Daniel Craig James Bond films, where very easily, spoiler if you haven't seen it by now, it's been out for a couple of years, where James Bond dies at the end of the film. I know, crazy. But you don't get that hard out like you do in this one. Spoiler alert, Ethan Hunt doesn't die. But you get this kind of satisfactory ending of them all going, like, they kind of end the movie the way they start the movie, too, where they kind of have this meeting place where they kind of, like, can acknowledge that each other are there and just give a little wink and a nod without saying anything to each other, knowing they're going to be okay. And you get that at the end of the film as well, where they kind of all go off and do their own thing, which leads those characters that if they do move forward, maybe they get incorporated into other stories. If they, move on past Ethan Hunt, maybe, and these guys have bit pieces and bit roles to play in other future adaptations, which is fine if that's the route you want to go. But it was a very fitting end to Ethan Hunt's story, where the stakes are at an all-time high here, and you're dealing with that very existential end of humanity crisis. You can't really go beyond that at this point. So if this is the way they send off Ethan Hunt, they threw everything against the wall in this film just to kind of make it work and have the stakes be as literally higher than you could ever possibly imagine. So for that, I'll tip my hat to them. But there was so much more I felt like they could have done that they didn't use this time as wisely for. So we'll see where it winds up in your rankings versus mine, and where in the entire timeline where this film winds up. Like I said, I still enjoyed the movie. I can't think of a where I think this is an objectively bad film, with the exception of maybe one that I think is probably going to be the bottom of both of our lists. Mm-hmm. But it's still like, you know what you're getting here, and you get that in spades as far as like action and suspense. Like they do a good job of that. So hats off to him for that.
And you got Angela Bassett's character, who had appeared before. I believe Fallout was our first appearance first. She's now president. So you're dealing with that side where the United States has to decide exactly what they're going to do. They don't want Ethan to, Ethan is gung-ho that I'm going to destroy this. No one's going to be able to do anything. No one should have control of it and need to be destroyed. But, several members of her cabinet want to, control it and everything. And she's got decisions she has to make, because when we get to the crux of the story, it's 4 countries are left that have not had their nuclear program taken over yet, and it's coming down to, of course, the United States is going to be the last one because we're supposed to be the most secure and everything else, and it comes down that she has to make a decision that do you kill 100 million to save billions? Or do you allow Ethan to have the time, because they have no contact with him? They have no idea what he's doing, because everything is off, because everything on this movie relies on a hope and a prayer that Ethan, even though they're been against him every single movie because they talk about how he's rogue and how he doesn't do things by the book and he does things in a way, but in the end of the day, he saves the day.
Correct.
But they're still against him. Well, he doesn't listen. He doesn't do anything. He does whatever he wants to do. But that ends up coming down he's still doing whatever he wants to do, but we're finally going to trust him a little bit. But then again, it wasn't fully that they trust him, because an incident happened, and that prevents them from doing the thing that they were going to do. It's in the end, they didn't really trust him. It's still the same as it's always been. They didn't really trust him to get the job done.
The central theme of it is we know this is outlandish and over the top, and our 1 in a billion shot, and you're literally the only person that can actually do it, whether we trust you or not. We know, if there's anybody that can pull this off, it's you, to kind of really save as many lives as possible here, where now you're trying to save everyone and not just, willing to sacrifice a quote-unquote tiny portion of the human population to, stop this from happening to everybody. But it's absurd, but it's absurdly done well, if that makes sense. I'm nitpicking and poking at it just because of how outlandish and over the top it is. It's just in what feasible way does this possibly work? But they managed to pull it off and make it entertaining at the same time. So you get points for that if you're willing to suspend a little disbelief. But it's going to be interesting to see where we wind up on this, because Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning is the conclusion to an almost 30-year story arc of Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise. Make no bones about it, it is a long film. It's almost 3 hours long, but you get this long love letter to the Mission Impossible franchise up until this point. It's the 8th film in the series, and you lay it all on the line here. There's a ton of callbacks, a ton of things that kind of reward you if you've gone on this journey, where, they do beat you over the head with it at times, but they pay it the proper respects too. So the plot of this film is a little linear and feels like a proper continuation to why this wasn't kept Dead Reckoning Part 2 and just made The Final Reckoning. I get it, but it still very much feels like a continuation of Dead Reckoning to the proper conclusion that we got here. And, the action is done well. The over-the-topness of it is going to drag it down for the score for me a little bit, but I'm still willing to give this film a 7 out of 10. I think I land on that fair. It's not without its issues. It's not without its pacing problems, but at the end of the day, you're still getting a high quality action film from a franchise that has been very consistent for the most part, for the better part of 30 years. And I think they land the plane on the Ethan Hunt story in a way that, works for the narrative that they've told over the last 30 years. So for that, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. It's not going to wind up being my favorite Mission Impossible of the franchise, but it's still a pretty solid film all around and a really high quality action film.
He is even the worst Mission Impossible is better than most of the action films and stuff we get because there is most of the time a care and attention that is put into these films, and it does feel like this one didn't get as much of that care and attention. Like, I'm actually going to be slightly higher than you. I'm going to give it a 7.5, but I think that 7.5 is the fair range because it could have trimmed 30 to 45 minutes with doing all the flashbacks and stuff. The villain was very thin. We thought maybe after Dead Reckoning we'd get a little bit more depth to him, but we really didn't. The action sequences were fun, but you had to suspend disbelief because especially the submarine, which looked fantastic. It was a lot of fun, but it made him into a superhero basically after that. Like, it got really ridiculous, but it was an ending that wasn't an ending, but it is an ending, but it's not an ending, but it is an ending. So it's like it left it open for more, while if this is the last one, okay, it's got a solid ending, but it didn't end as you would expect the final of a series to be. So, like, I doubt this is the last time we do see the Ethan Hunt, whether if he's the main character still or not, or exactly what we're going to do. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. It wasn't a bad movie, but it had its problems.
Sure. Yeah. It suffered a lot from pacing, like you said. If you cut a lot of the, like you said, if you cut the good 30 to 40 minutes of the flashbacks and the beating you over the head with it, it probably would have been a better movie had you cut a lot of that out and just gotten to the point of it. So what leads me to believe that it's going to be the final film here, and by all accounts it is, until somebody says otherwise, or like,
if it makes a lot of money like it looks like it's doing now.
You know how it is with Hollywood, you never know. But I think if they go back to the well, you can't have Ethan Hunt be the focal point of the film at this point, because he's kind of exhausted all the things. Like, if you need to use him as a reference to kind of help whoever takes up that mantle next,
and maybe finally give him a happy ending instead
of
what he's had.
And they just left it open for whatever they want to do, which, right, wrong, or indifferent isn't the worst way to end things for somebody, but it feels like a proper way to send him out now, as opposed to whatever we wind up getting on the future. So Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning is in theaters now. This is a big-time blockbuster film to go see in the theaters. Fantastic time. Visually, it's still a very well put together film visually. A lot of the action sequences are shot and they look super cool, and bright set pieces and dark set pieces when they need to be. And it's a really solid action film that's worthy of your time in the theater. If you haven't gone to check it out, check it out.
It's the first big action blockbuster film we've seen in a while that we were there maybe 15 minutes before the preview started, and they were still configuring. We got to see them trying to make sure the alignment and the focus and everything of the film was there. And that's the first time I'm seeing, like, they were taking that much care, and it felt like the sound was cranked up, and it felt like they took a little more time to make sure that the picture was done right for it and stuff. So it was a lot of fun, but I am curious to dive into now to see if this is the final Mission Impossible movie, where all these films rank. So we both did our own list here. So, I mean, the best way to do it is to start at the bottom of what our least favorite of the Mission Impossible films. And I think majority of people who like the Mission Impossible films probably have it the same as I do, which is Mission Impossible 2, the John Woo Mission Impossible film. The very first Mission Impossible movie was more like the TV show. It was that spy thriller. It had a different feel to it. When it got to John Woo's, it was way over the top. You had, of course, the motorcycle fight battle at the end, and Ethan kicking the gun up out of the sand, and a lot of really it set the path forward for a lot of the stuff we did get that got a little more grounded and done better. But it was kind of campy. It was really over the top with what they did. And there's just way too much mask ripping of, oh, I'm wearing a mask and you're wearing a mask and I'm wearing a mask and you're wearing a mask. Well, my mask is a mask. And it just went crazy with the masking in it.
Yeah, you could tell this movie really struggled from an identity crisis, really, because you could see them wanting to kind of ratchet it up and turn it into what it ultimately became, which is a high-end, high-quality blockbuster action type film that's not as much grounded in its spy roots that the original Mission Impossible film was. And you really see that identity struggle in this film. Like it's one of the films that I saw a couple times just to kind of get my brain around it a little bit more, because as much of a mind trip as the first one was, you can really see the disjointedness in the second one versus what we know came beyond it. And for that reason, I have to agree. I have to put it at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, so what do you have in your 7th spot then? Because I think this might be where a lot of people start differing of where they're putting the rest of the films.
Yeah, because I think once you get past that, these are all high-quality films. Like, they're all good action films. I personally put Mission Impossible 3, because I think it was really starting to kind of get off and, find itself a little bit in this one, but I still think it was lacking overall quality that you really see jump off from, say, the 4th one and beyond, that really, really takes off. And it was still like getting off the ground a little bit here. Like, it's still a solid film and better than the second one. But for me, it's not quite as impactful as the first one. And it's not quite where the other films got as far as, pacing and tone and action quality and everything, that it was still kind of finding its voice a little bit. Like, it got there, but for that reason, I have to put it at 7.
You see, I've got mine a little different when I think of it. That I put the first Mission Impossible here, mainly because it is so disconnected from the rest of the Mission Impossible films. Like, we got our introduction of Ethan, we got the spy, and we got a lot of the elements that we see going forward with it, but it just feels such like it, almost like it doesn't belong to the franchise after the 3rd and 4th film as it went forward there. Sure. It just felt so different. So I put that one as my 7. I put Mission Impossible 3 as my 6, mainly because Philip Seymour Hoffman was an incredible villain in that.
Sure, yeah.
He was fantastic. We got a little more depth, but it did have that kind of weird, like, it's, Ethan has found love and he's trying to leave it behind, and she's dead, but she's not. And it set, I think, a lot of the elements that they put forward in the 4th and beyond to really set the stage for it. I think 3 gets a little bit more than Mission Impossible for me, just because it is a little closer to 4 and beyond, and Mission Impossible just feels a little more disconnected from the rest, just because of what John Woo did with the second one. Almost put a hard line in between Mission Impossible 1 and the rest of them.
Yeah, and it's kind of, 3 was about finding its way back to where it was going to be, and it set the table for stuff, and that's fine. By putting it 7th in a list of 8 films doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad. It just means I hold these other films in higher regard. So when we move up to number 6, I have Mission Impossible 1, and I think that's where we kind of flip-flopped our rankings a little bit. But as a standalone film at the time, it was this groundbreaking, really cool spy thriller / action film done. Like, the vault scene was incredible at the time. Just a real feat, and it's a cool story. John Voight was, a serviceable villain overall in the first film, and you really get that spy nature type film that was really cool and kind of groundbreaking at the time. And I still find myself going back and watching that one several times just to, see a significantly younger Tom Cruise to what you see now, and the crew cut and the buzz cut that he's got in this film versus where he winds up by the end here with the long shaggy hair. But like, it's still cool to see like the jumping off point for this franchise that, it wound up like becoming something bigger and more grandiose and over the top, but I really enjoy that gritty, spy element type film that we got here that was a little more aligned to the heart of what the TV show was, just kind of dialed up to 10 at that point, and just it holds a high spot for me for that reason.
I think those two are very close at a 6 and 7 of being pretty interchangeable, just both because of their impact. Like, if you looked at the Mission Impossible movie by its own, like, it's a great little spy film, and my brain was more looking at the overall impact of it on the series, and that's why it got above John Woo, even though that gave us the infamous cliff climbing scene with Tom Cruise and everything like that. But it just didn't have as big of an impact overall, because even though they tried to bring it back into Final Reckoning, it still didn't really have that big of an impact from a story and how it did, because the style changed completely from what they did with the first one. So that's kind of why I flip-flopped those two. But
makes sense.
I'm putting The Final Reckoning next at 5. Like, I think it's still a good film. It's it's one of those that it just needed to be tightened up and cleaner. I think Dead Reckoning was the better of it, because it's hard to not look at these two with Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning as almost like it's one story. Yeah. So I kind of look at it as almost one film. So which one is better? So I did end up putting Dead Reckoning at 4 and Final Reckoning at 5, because I do feel Dead Reckoning it gave us more of the spy. It gave us some the train scenes and the bike jump, and everything else was really fun, exhilarating. You bring in Haley Atwell and you get all that. You got the introduction of Gabriel, which kind of worked in there. They just kind of dropped the ball on giving him more substance in the Final Reckoning. So I've got those back to back, but Dead Reckoning is definitely the better of the two to me. So that puts Final Reckoning at number 5 for me.
And I have them ranked the same here. I have them both at 4 and 5, Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning back to back. Now, where I think you and I may differ a little bit is I hold one in such high enough regard, I almost put it ahead of Final Reckoning. And it's comparing the bookends of the franchise here when you have them back to back for me. I hold that first film in such high regard for the tone of the film, for the way it kind of kicks off everything here in totality. I even think if I go back and rewatch these, I may reorder it and may put it ahead of Final Reckoning. I don't know.
And so that's the thing which is interesting with this ranking, because I did go back through and watch all of them. So I've rewatched all 8 of them. So that's kind of where I've been, but you didn't rewatch any of them. So it is going to be interesting if your rank does change. And we'll put this on like our letterbox, put our ranking stuff to where if you decide to go back and watch them and you change your rank, that it can be updated on there. But yeah, I thought this was going to be fun just because of that, because I did rewatch all of them, and that's kind of where, after rewatching them all, where my ranking fell, and yours is more off of your memories of what it was before.
Yeah, and you've got that recency bias for you for how you've seen it versus me, who obviously I've seen every film, and I've seen every film at least twice, so I've seen them all multiple times.
And we're talking a franchise that spans 30 years too, so there's a lot of difference between the cinematography and how it's filmed and how it can look and sound and storytelling through 30 years.
It's a long franchise, and it's a lot to keep up with. But for those ones, like, I think putting them fairly in the middle compared to everything here, because you have 3 above it and 3 below it, and putting it in the middle, not denigrating either film. I agree. I think Dead Reckoning is the better of the 2 films. I love Dead Reckoning a lot. Like, it's really good. But these top 3, I think you and I are going to differ in the order in which we put them in. But, like, want to just jump ahead up to it, and we can go to number 3 if we want to, but just to kind of put them back to back, if I had to rank Dead Reckoning or Final Reckoning, which film I'd prefer to watch first, obviously linearly it's Dead Reckoning, but I think Dead Reckoning was a better setup film than this one was a finishing film. Like, it's
absolutely,
it was really cool and really well done when it came out, and I wound up walking out of it very impressed for whatever the follow-up to it was going to be, and I didn't have that same wow factor coming out of this one that I did out of that one. So for that, I had to put it up ahead of it. But these top 3, man, you can kind of flip a coin between them. And it's so rare that you see a film when you get to like 4, 5, and 6, really see it hit its stride, because that's usually when the quality of a franchise dives off a cliff. But I think this is where Mission Impossible is kind of the anomaly here, and it really jumped off at 4, 5, and 6 to some really incredible movies. For my 3rd one, I put Fallout. I know Fallout is going to wind up being a lot of people's favorites, but I put it at 3rd only because I hold, Rogue Nation and Ghost Protocol slightly above it. But these are so interchangeable for me that I think if I go back, I may feel a little differently. But Fallout of the remaining 3 was the one that was still such a great film, but it goes to show how high of regard I have for the other 2. Not taking it away. Fallout was a fantastic film.
Yeah.
But I hold the other 2 in just a little bit of a higher regard, that it's like a paper, like as thin as this paper that we typed it on, a margin between these 3, that they're so potentially interchangeable depending on, how I watch. I really want to go back and watch just because of this, just to see if it changes my mind. But for now, I'm putting Fallout at 3.
And after having my rewatch, Fallout is actually my number 1. That's my top favorite out of all of them. You got Henry Cavill in there, who's playing
fantastic fight scene.
The reloading his arms and the bathroom fights, the jumping through a storm in there, and all the action sequences. That one did have a little bit more over the top action stuff with it, but I like the, Henry Cavill being a villain, and you've got, that he's pretending to be a good guy, but he's with them through the whole film until he finally turns into being the bad guy. And you get, you bring his wife back, and you're getting the kind of end of her story of where she's at, that she's remarried, and you've got all that, and you've got, they're trying to disarm the nuclear bombs and everything else that happens on. You've got, I really enjoyed it, but I do say those three between Rogue Nation, Ghost Protocol, and Fallout can be really easily interchanged depending on when you last watched them or when you really remember, because they are clearly the top three of this franchise. Yeah. So I actually have Ghost Protocol as my number 3, which would put Rogue Nation at 2 and Fallout at 1. But I said that's the core Mission Impossible. Sure. That's where they really got the dramatics and the story and the spy and the espionage and the action and the acting and just the plethora of stars that they've had come through those movies, with Vanessa Kirby, and you had Haley Atwell in the last 2, and you had Simon Pegg introduced in the 3rd, and Ving has been there since the beginning. You've had Jon Voight, and you've had Angela Bassett, and you've had just so
an incredible
many
roster of people.
And Philip Seymour Hoffman in the 3rd one, and you've incredible amount of actors and good actors and actresses that have been through this. And I didn't even mention it in our review of Final Reckoning. I absolutely love Palm coming into Dead Reckoning and Final Reckoning. I want to see her in more. Absolutely. Like, of course, a lot of us first saw her in the Guardians of the Galaxy when she's playing Mantis, but seeing her in a action spy espionage, playing a villain who gets to kind of turn good, like, she was fantastic.
She's amazing. She's an amazing actress. So you've got Fallout at 1, Rogue Nation at 2, and Ghost Protocol at 3.
Yep.
My number 1 is actually, I love Ghost Protocol. Don't get me wrong. I put it at 2. But for me, Rogue Nation, in my opinion, is the best Mission Impossible film. It feels to me like the most complete, well-rounded film out of all of them. Incredible story, action, pacing, tone. Like, I think everything that encapsulates what makes Mission Impossible is Rogue Nation to me. Like, I just love that story. I remember going and seeing it in theaters, walking out saying, wow, I can't believe after seeing however many number of these films that it's better than it's ever been at this point in the series. And it just goes to show, like, the strong quality writing that you've had throughout, consistently good to great movies. And I just feel like Rogue Nation was like peak Mission Impossible at its best at everything. And for that, I put it just a little bit above Ghost Protocol. Ghost Protocol was sick. It had some of the coolest visuals.
And you got Rebecca Ferguson that was introduced in those films, was a fantastic actress.
Amazing
and did great
as well. Like, a really great addition to that. But for me, Rogue Nation is the most complete Mission Impossible film.
Like I said, as we've discussed here, I do feel those 3, Fallout, Rogue Nation, and Ghost Protocol, are ones that could be. Tomorrow, it could be Rogue Nation and Ghost Protocol, then Fallout, or it could be Fallout a second and Ghost Protocol a first and Rogue Nation a third. Like,
all good films.
They're all really fantastic. That could be really I think those top 3, there really isn't a right answer. It depends on the entertainment and everything you got out of it. Like, it could change day to day on which one of those 3 are the best. It's clear that they're the best 3.
Sure.
But their order could be any order there. Fallout is just one that's the most memorable to me, that I had kind of the most fun with, and I like that double agent with Henry Cavill and stuff that we flipped in there. And you did bring back some, other characters, had some good action. You had, Vanessa Kirby's character in there with her being the White Widow that she was called, and you had it was just a lot of fun, like all of it that they did. And also it kind of played with you that you had Ethan looking at things like, well, he's playing it through his head, and you see what a mission goes through, and like, wait, did that actually just happen? Did Ethan just kill a officer? Oh no, okay, so he was thinking that through. But Rogue Nation was fantastic as well. It had a great story and everything to it. Even had some fun where it was the one time that I can remember that I think, Fallout as well, because of the mask broke and they couldn't get it, but he goes undercover as a Russian asset where he's just wearing a mustache and a hat and didn't actually use the mask and stuff. Correct. Like, they decided not to do that. So that was kind of interesting choices that we've used the mask hundreds of times in the series up to then. So it's like, okay, we're just going to put a mustache on him and have him walk through.
Did it in a different way.
But it was great with Simon Pegg. It was just... that was his first, like, real undercover thing that he did out on the field. And he's like, I'm just, he's just whispering and talking to him, and you can see Ethan just like, you just shut up and do the mission.
That's what I'm saying.
But that's why it was so entertaining and fun. But yeah, I could interchange these three probably daily on which one's my favorite.
Yeah, and you can't go wrong with any of the three. Like I said, in my opinion, as it stands today, without having the recency bias of rewatching them, I just remember Rogue Nation having the biggest impact of any of them on me, just because I felt like it's the most complete story that they've told from start to finish. And I may feel a little differently if I go back and watch them again here, which I do plan on doing, but it's going to be fun to go revisit now. But that was fun to kind of go and dive into the rankings of the film, because we do feel like it is at the end for Ethan Hunt. So it's apropos for us to go and, rank how we feel about all of these throughout.
And it's been one of the most consistent action blockbuster series that we've had. I mean, it spans 30 years, so that's saying something.
Yeah, it's had a tremendous amount of staying power. It's as popular as it's ever been. And, kudos to them for wrapping up a story in a way that if you wanted to walk away, you could. If you wanted to go back to the well, you probably still could. But I hope that they don't for Ethan as the focal character, only because where could the stakes at this point go for this guy? I mean, you literally, like you said, a dozen times already, it's an existential humanitarian crisis that the entire planet is at stake here. And where do you go from there? How do you...
Ethan the villain.
Sure.
But then that would ruin his legacy.
It would ruin his legacy, yeah, which I don't think they'll ever do. But, okay, if you want to do like another Mission Impossible type thing where you get a new IMF agent, sure, go for it.
So Ethan discovers a ring that opens up a portal, and him and Grace go through the portal, and he becomes Tony Stark, and she becomes Captain. And they join the MCU.
That'd be great. Okay. That's
we brought it all together. Mission
going,
Impossible is part of the MCU. You're welcome.
To the MCU. Ethan Hunt as Tony Stark.
Well, it's always because when you get to these big, especially we talk where it almost went a little Fast and Furious and going a little superhero like. I mean, if the Avengers were made in the 90s, if he wasn't doing Mission Impossible, it was quite possible that he would have been Tony Stark. Yeah. And there's been rumors and rumblings of wanting to bring him into the MCU to be a variant of Tony, just so we can see that. So that's when my brain just, that's because we already got, of course, several people who's in Mission Impossible are in the MCU as well. So it's not that far of a stretch to go with it, but it has been the most consistent action blockbuster film, spy, espionage films, like past James Bond. Like if you're looking at those type of films, it's James Bond, it's Mission Impossible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's outlived several James Bonds within that time frame now. Yeah. Like what has been 2 or 3 James Bonds, and that because it's Pierce and Daniel Craig in the same time frame that he's been Ethan Hunt.
Yeah, he's outlasted 2 Bonds. That's an impressive feat. So, I mean, it was cool to go back and talk about this. I know there's going to be a couple people, and I'm looking directly at the camera when I say this. Do not come for me just because I didn't put Henry Cavill's film number 1 in my rankings. You know who you are. Don't come for me. Love Henry Cavill. You know how I feel about him. But no, it's cool to go through and kind of revisit these and talk about these a little bit, just in how we feel how the overall franchise performed. But yeah, I mean, you get 1 through 8 here, all solid. Even 2 is still it's still a solid action movie. It's just not continuity wise as much in line with the other films as this one is. And you could still go back and watch it and enjoy it, get enjoyment out of it. I'd still give that one a solid 5.5 to 6, which isn't a terrible.
Even the worst Mission Impossible movie is better than a lot of the stuff that we get anymore.
Of course. And it just goes to show the high quality of films that they've continued to make over the last 30 years. So that was a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah, so if you have a ranking, if you've watched Final Reckoning, come to our Discord, come to our YouTube comments, our social media, talk with us about it. We'd love to see what your rankings are. Either share your Letterboxd rankings that you have, or just list out your rankings and see where you feel. Because I feel like 1 through 3 is going to be very similar for everybody between Fallout, Rogue Nation, and Ghost Protocol, but it's where the rest of them fall on that line that gets kind of interesting on what people feel. I think 2 is at the bottom of most, but like you, it depends on where Mission Impossible 1 and 3. I do know a few rankings I saw that had 3 as their top one, but which I can see, but it wasn't that high to me, even though as much as I love Philip Seymour Hoffman's villain role in 3, it's still a little bit low for me, but it's not a bad choice to have that as your top one, because it's not a terrible film.
Not at all. And it's a lot of people's jumping off of kind of reclaiming that franchise back from what 2 was. And, it's still a good film in its own right, just because you have it ranked, in my case, we had it 7th out of 8 and yours is 6th out of 8. Still a really good movie. Still a solid movie. I would absolutely watch it 10 more times just to, just go back and visit it. But yeah, I want to go back and rewatch them again and see if my opinions on them change.
I recommend it because I had a lot of fun revisiting all of them and seeing them again and just seeing, especially Mission Impossible 1, because I hadn't watched it in such a long time, that go back and rewatch that one of the feeling and how I felt about it originally. Would probably had it at the bottom just because I watched it so young. I mean, I was 13 when the first Mission Impossible came out, or 12. I was 6. I'm gonna stick to that now.
And now we're lying to the audience. Great, good to know. Anything's on. Yeah, rip that mask off, buddy. But no, I will say the first Mission Impossible film I've watched significantly more than any of the others in the franchise. I watched that movie a lot when it came out. Like, I was enamored with it. Like, that's how much I enjoyed it. But that goes to speak to the overall quality that I have it as 6th, and that's the one I've seen the most, which is crazy to think, but it's just where it wound up ranking in the quality of these films. I'm definitely going to watch. I don't know how long it's going to take me to watch it, but I'm going to rewatch all of them. We'll see if my opinions on them change.
Yeah, and even though I watched Dead Reckoning before, like the day before I went to see Final Reckoning, I want to watch those back to back because they do feel like a singular story. Even though it's going to be 6 hours of movie watching, it's almost like that's extended. It's like Lord of the Rings going back to it. Like, that feels like an extended edition having those two together because it is one story. It was part 1 and part 2. So it feels like that story, it could change my ranking a little bit of just my feeling on Final Reckoning. Maybe it's score less than ranking. But I think those two need to be watched like back to back as you can, even though it's going to be difficult being 6 hours worth of film to watch, but it's one solid story. And I want to I almost want to see a cut that's those two films cut together as one and see how it looks.
I'm going to say, how dare you compare that to Lord of the Rings when you how high regard
I'm talking about the length of the extended editions.
You heard the man. No, I'm just kidding.
The length of the extended editions.
That's the only comparison. But
far superior. Lord of the
Rings. great films in their own right, though. But still, I get what you're saying. Just carve out a winter day when you're snowed in. The 1 to 2 days a year we get really, really, really good snow. That's when you want to watch it. But yeah, I'm excited to go back and dive into those because I want to see if especially my top 3, if those change a little bit. I want to see. So we'll see. I'll let you know. Might take me like 3 or 4 months to do it, but I'll do it just because we're watching so much stuff. It's hard to make the time to do it, but I definitely plan on revisiting it for sure.
So heading on into what's coming up this week, we do have one that we're kind of looking forward to. You can go back in our archives to see what we thought about Cobra Kai and how that ended, but this is kind of a continuation, but not a continuation. I'm really curious to see how Karate Kid Legends, if it even mentions Cobra Kai at all, or if it just goes and does its own thing here, because we're kind of bridging the gap between Ralph Macchio's Karate Kid with Jackie Chan's Karate Kid that he did, and we're bringing them together with something new. I'm like, I don't really know. I don't think I have high hopes for it, but I'm at least hoping that we get something entertaining, because I loved Cobra Kai, and I'm hoping they do, but it's not the same team that did Legends, that did Cobra Kai, so I'm just fully not certain how I'm going to feel about this new Karate Kid Legends film that's coming out.
I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this film either. Like, it's you can't ignore the fact that Cobra Kai exists when it comes to this film. Like, there's so much history tied up there that it's canon now, and like it picks up, but it's going to be interesting. I'm wondering if the way they get around referencing it is maybe if it takes place in between when Cobra Kai happens and this tournament happens. But from what I've seen from the trailer, like it almost feels like the things that he learned about Miyagi were mentioned in the film. So I think you're getting a time jump ahead a little bit. Maybe not sure how far beyond the end of Cobra Kai this is taking place and where it falls in all of the timeline. But it's going to be interesting to see how they. You got to throw a wink and a nod to the audience here that Cobra Kai is a thing and it exists. Like, he's been up to some things, and it could be just even subtle, like, couple one-liners here talking about, well, I got to get back because, I got this whole...
I left Johnny alone with the kids.
Yeah, something like that to let you know that, like, hey, this happens, this exists, and it's done. While we're going on and doing our own thing, because obviously, Jackie's got to do probably the bulk of the heavy lifting here. I don't know how much Ralph Macchio is actually involved in this film, how much Danny LaRusso is a part of it to a point, what point he comes in. But it's going to be fun. I'm going into it with an open mind to kind of take it as it comes, not expect the world. I'm not expecting Cobra Kai level quality for the film, but I could be pleasantly surprised, and I'm hoping that you fall on that side of it as opposed to the other side. So we'll see what it looks like when it comes out and how the story shakes out.
It'll be going up against a horror film that's been getting some decent buzz just for how dark and graphic and gory and stuff it is, and that's Bring Her Back. So that's going to be an interesting one to check out too, to see just exactly like you get, especially with horror films, it can hype up the gore and the just violence and horror and stuff they do, and a lot of them don't actually end up being that way. It's just the hype to build up this is the greatest horror movie ever since this, and like it's okay. But I've barely seen any. I think I've seen one trailer on this, so I haven't seen much on it to really have much of an opinion going into it.
Talk about the hype for it. I'm looking at you, monkey. Go back in our archives and see how we felt about that one that was getting overly hyped. But yeah, this one, like I said, with the same hype, I'm looking forward to checking it out and seeing if it lives up to that or if it's another case of it's calling it the most must-see horror film of the year, which I know you're getting ready to talk about what the actual must-see horror film of the year is that's getting ready to drop on streaming.
Yeah, so first up we have Shadow Force, a Kerry Washington spy action thriller. Again, that got like at the 15-day window. That'll be out on demand on May 30th, but Sinners is coming home on demand.
So excited for that.
On June 3rd. So that's 45-day window for that movie. It's made over $300 million. Amazing. It's done so well, and that is the must-see horror film for me this year so far. As it was so fantastic. Go back in our archive, see our review of Sinners. It's so well worth checking out. So you still have a little bit of time to check it out in theaters before Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible and all the other films that are coming out after these two push it out of theaters, but we'll have that to watch at home here soon.
I can't wait to check it out again. I'm very confident in saying that film is going to wind up on my top 5 films of the year list for sure. A lot of good films still coming this year, but that one left a really good impression on me. Go back in our archives, like you said, check out what we thought of that film, and come let us know if you saw it. So many people have seen it, made a ton of money at the box office. Couldn't be happier for them. A really well made film. I'm excited to get that on streaming.
Yeah, over on the streaming side, we have Mountainhead on HBO Max, so not Max, HBO Max now. Steve Carell and Jason Schwartzman comedy film about billionaires. That's drops on streaming on May 31st. I haven't seen a trailer for it. I've seen the poster, a little bit of information I looked up when I saw that this was coming out, but it's another one of those just kind of quiet digital streaming film releases. It could be interesting. I love Steve Carell, but he's had a kind of wild film release that he's done. I mean, he's done the morning show TV show on Apple TV Plus where he played a very dark type of character in that. He's done the Space Force show, which was very mixed and everything. He's done a pretty wide range of stuff. You're just really not sure what you're going to get out of it. So I'm really curious to see if this one turns out to be any good or not.
I got to admit, I've seen absolutely nothing about this, but that's probably because HBO Max is still suffering from an identity crisis after all these years. They don't know what the hell to call themselves. I don't know, but I've seen absolutely nothing on this. The premise of it sounds interesting, worthy enough of checking it out. I'm sure I'll check it out at some point, but, saw absolutely nothing about this. And, had we not brought it up and looked ahead to what was coming up, I wouldn't have even known this thing existed probably until I opened Max or HBO Max or whatever I can open before it tries to fry my streaming device to, figure out what it wants to call itself. But maybe I'll see
they
it.
They tried to go the Apple TV Plus route of advertising this movie,
where they just didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's more of the same. But yeah, we'll check it out and see if it's any good. But like I said, I like Jason Schwartzman, I like Steve Carell, so potential's there for a decent film. We'll see if it's any good or worth watching, and hopefully it's a good time.
Hopefully.
But that's going to do it for this week's episode. As always, we cannot thank you enough for your continued support. Coming up next week, we got some fun reviews coming up. We've got Karate Kid Legends. We're both excited to go to the theater and check that one out. But we're also going to be doing a full recap of Season 2 of HBO Max's The Last of Us. So
not a controversial
season at all by any means, but that's one that we're going to have a lot of fun. The season finale is dropping before this episode airs, so we'll have time to watch that, reflect, and give our overall impressions of that season. But I cannot wait to talk about that because there's a lot of things to talk about, both good, both bad, and the internet definitely has some strong opinions about that one. But we'll all touch on that next week. But until then, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next time. To find all of the episodes of We'll Bring the Popcorn, go to our YouTube page, hit the like and subscription button so you're getting our episodes when they drop each and every Monday. If you're listening to us in the audio realm on any of the podcasting platforms that we're on, please don't forget to give us a 5-star review. It really helps elevate the profile of the show. And don't forget to go to willbringthepopcorn.com, where it has all of our archive videos, all of our social media information, as well as our merch store, so you continue to support the show in that way. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support.